Well, welcome to today's workshop. This is going to be a focus on really what I call the transdimensional sciences of the next millennium. And it's dealing essentially with where current knowledge of science meets the science of consciousness and contact experience, and puts all those things together so they make sense to people. So the first thing to get your mind around is to forget everything you know about conventional wisdom, if you've studied the UFO subject, but also what you know about conventional science, because they're both antiquated and have been purposely kept antiquated. I'll get into this in a moment. Dumbed down. They use something that's beyond even post-quantum physics. And it's a little bit like going back to Thomas Jefferson's era, which was only a couple of hundred years ago, and showing him this thing, a smartphone. And there'd be no foundation for understanding this. This would be metaphysical. So to the New Age people, they say, well, it's a metaphysical thing. Well, I say, well, meta what? What do you mean metaphysical? Metaphysical is just a term that people use when they don't quite understand the science of a phenomenon that's occurring. The comprehension of that requires a lot of humility on the part of humans, which we typically lack, but particularly scientists and theologians. We'll get to that a little bit later. There's people with spiritual understanding. These technologies that are interstellar are operating from a level of an understanding of the cosmos and reality that is one where consciousness and the mind is present at every level, even the 3D level, because it's the only thing that explains the phenomena and all the different manifestations. And of course, in the aerospace industry, they have more colorful terms for this. I was flying last year to Australia, and I accidentally was put beside a man going from Sydney to Brisbane. He said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm here for a meeting. He says, oh. I said, kind of dealing with some of the stuff that you may or may not deal with. And I just opened the door a little bit. He says, oh yeah, we know what, we call that PFM. I said, what? He said, pure fucking magic. But that is why it's called PFM. But at the CIA, it's called WSFM. It sounds like a radio station. It stands for Weird Science and Frickin' Magic. And that is what they call this. In the Naval Research Lab, people call it that. Because what it deals with is a type of phenomenon that when you get into a certain level of very high voltage systems, where the voltage is at a certain frequency and resonant field. And I'm not going to bore people with the arcana of this, but let's say you have a Poynting vector, or you put an energy field with very high voltage around an object that's a couple million volts, with very, very low amperage. So there's not much power involved, but at a certain cycles per second, or hertz, resonant, and in specific resonant field, that object can be made to literally begin to resonate and then tilt out of linear space-time, and it will disappear. Now, I've been in a lab that's run near the Redstone Arsenal in Alabama, Huntsville, where this stuff has been done, and so by humans. So it's disappeared. You can't see it, and it actually has moved into another dimension. Dimension 6, 10, 12, 80, 90, whatever it is. Someone asked me, how many dimensions are there? I said, how many numbers are there between 0 and infinity?
And he said, well, he said a bumblebee can't fly aerodynamically. Yeah, and he's right. And I said, well, what did bumblebees do? And they said, well, they levitate. And I said, well, how's that? The bumblebee, when he starts to beat his wings, when he starts to flap his wings, there's a little cavity, a hollow cavity next to the larynx inside his system that's hollow. And when he beats his wings, he starts to resonate this energy, and it goes back and forth, just similar to a guitar strumming on one side of the room and hitting the same chord on the other side of the room, or somebody hitting a high C and breaking a crystal. It's the same thing, it's resonance. And he said what they do, they resonate. And when they resonate, they eventually reach the resonance of the field around them. And he explained it this way to me, that the Earth was operating on a frequency of 8.5 hertz per second or so forth. And he says once this bumblebee hits that resonant frequency of its surroundings, it becomes a free agent. It creates a magnetic bubble around itself, and it can go anywhere it wants. And I said, well, that's not in any of the science books. He said, I know. You probably never see it there either, but that's what happens. They'll discover it someday and bring it out, but it's just we have a conventional way of doing things, and then we have a natural way of doing things, and they're totally different. They're diametrically opposed in many, many cases.
Traveling to your world is not so difficult. We can travel more slowly if we wish through the manipulation of electromagnetic and gravitic fields. The idea, however, of going from star system to star system happens in a very different way. While you think of an object as existing in a location, to us, location is one of the properties of the object. If you thus then have an object at point A, and you are able to isolate it with an energy bubble, in a sense, unlock it from any particular reality, and thus then impose upon it the vibrational signature frequency of location B, it must stop existing at location A and instantaneously start taking up residence at location B without actually having traveled the intervening distance.